And if I look at
Hello, everyone. Good to see you all here. I'm Kiva from Coacharya. We welcome you to our webinar today with Komal and our guest, Preethi. Before they join in, I want to just quickly request you all to actually share with us where you are joining in from, what you're looking forward to in today's session. We'll wait for a few more people to join in. Hello, hello. Please use the chat box. So as people are joining in, I am going to also just take a minute of your time, Komal, before I hand it over to you, to just share with everyone the different programs that we have lined up at Coacharya in March. So February is over, 2 months of the year are already over. We are in March now, and we have 5 really exciting courses here. As you'll see, we're starting with systemic team coaching on 9th March. And this is a new one that we are bringing in, and this is in line with ICF's ACTC certification. We have 3 coaching foundation courses and all with the different specializations. So we have neuro-linguistic programming, holistic life and well-being, and ontology. And we also have an advanced coaching program, which is on coaching leaders. So just wanted to start by sharing with you all what we are bringing to you with respect to the courses this month. And if any of you find any of these courses interesting and you want to know more, just write to us at contact@coacharya.com. So thank you so much, and welcome again, everyone. I am going to now hand it over to Komal and Preethi.
Thank you, Kiva. Thank you so much, and welcome everybody. Welcome to our today's conversation, where we are going to be celebrating a week ahead, the Women's Day. So today you see with me Preethi Raja, who's here in this space with her graciousness. And I must tell you that we are in to learn a whole lot from her in today's conversation. Preethi, would you like to say more about yourself? How you see yourself to our people?
hello, everybody. Happy to be here. About myself. So I think as an individual, I would probably, I think curiosity is my hallmark. Love to learn, continuously learn. So every day I look forward to adding something new. And I think a gypsy for all seasons. Love to travel and pack my bags, etc. From a professional perspective, I have close to 25 plus years of industry experience, and probably started at a time when computers were not part of, the industry, and have started my career in marketing and moved on to human resources. Have worked as HR business partner, then moved into consulting, learning and development, and currently, if I look at what I do, I think organization development consulting, leadership development, customized L&D programs, mostly behavioral. I'm a trained process work facilitator for conducting personal growth labs. I'm an MBTI certified trainer. But in addition to all that, I think I'm also an individual who loves all the good things in life. So travel, food, books, movies, and people. I think people take precedence over everything else. So meeting new people, I think, is one of the things I thoroughly enjoy doing. I've ventured into coaching, and I've just completed the basic foundation course with Coacharya for ACC, and in the process of credentialing with ICF. So that's what I'd like to share.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Preethi. A lot of hats that you wear, and a lot of people would be able to resonate with that. And something that I would personally would like to put a little bit of a light on when you shared with me earlier on, one experience which quite a lot of people generally would be more curious to know about is from where your life journey begins,
Mhm.
the culture and the environment is very different. And one aspect of that is that you grew up, you were born in a matrilineal family system.
Yeah.
So, could you, in your words, like what is that experience for you?
Sure. So I come from a place called Kozhikode in Kerala, Calicut, as most of you would know the English name. I belong to a matrilineal family. By matrilineal, I mean, by definition, is your lineage and descent and inheritance is through the women of the family. So from my grandmother and my mother. And I think a lot of communities much earlier, maybe about close to 200 years earlier, I think matrilineal was one of the ways that many communities actually followed, whether it was in Indonesia or Africa. But I think currently, if I look at matrilineal kind of living, it's very few that I'm aware of. I think Assam does follow, and in Kerala, there are some communities that follow matrilineal. So I grew up where having a girl child was very critical for continuing the lineage or the family. If you didn't have a girl child, your family kind of stopped. And in terms of inheritance, women actually, if you had to share property, then women would actually get one for themselves and as many children as they had. So if I have two, then I would get three shares in the property, whereas my brother would get only his. He wouldn't, because his children then had the lineage from their mother. So that was the way it was. But now I think it's pretty much rationalized and equal, though my name comes from my mother's and my grandmother's family name. So my inheritance and my lineage and descent, I belong to Calicut, not from my father's family, which is from Cochin.
And do you think that in a way has added something different or brought to you something different, which you probably would have observed later when you came to work in systems which are sort of more, resemble more like patriarchy systems?
That's true. So I think if I look back at the most influential people in my life, I would definitely like to talk about my grandmother. She was a very strong matriarch and a role model as far as I was concerned. She was a Gandhian, she was a freedom fighter. She worked for the upliftment of the marginalized people in society. Not only people, I think empowerment of women, education, financially empowering them by getting them organized into cooperatives, which could actually, produce things which can bring them financial independence. So I've seen her working at all levels and also traveling, well-read. So, I mean, I can actually, I mean, looking back, she has been one of my most strong influences, and also the decision maker in the family as I grew up. So, the authority we referred to as we grew up was her. Though I did grow up in a nuclear family, but I think every holiday growing up and a good part of my higher education, because my father had a transferable job. I mean, my initial part of my life, I was quite a gypsy because my father had a transferable job. So I've lived in most states in India, and in that sense, that's why I also call myself a gypsy. But I think there's a very, very strong anchor that my grandmother played in my life. So that's one thing. And I've seen my mother post that. So if I look at her as well, she is another woman who's been an entrepreneur, who's who's actually held the family together. I lost my dad pretty early in life, and she's another role model for me. So not only in the terms that she held the family, I think she also invested in other things, like, so she was the um, Kerala State Women's Chess Champion, I think 7 years in a row. She started a business just before my dad passed away. And then, of course, my dad was pretty young, so they offered his job to her later. And she was more educated than he was. So she had already done her post-graduation in social sciences and all that. So she worked. She was an entrepreneur. She continued her business, and she held the family together. So I think if I look back and look at people who have influenced the way my life and my choices have been made, I think it's been women.
Wonderful. That's so beautiful. I remember when I was little and I was growing up. So, in my mother's school, she was a teacher. Actually, I also studied in the same school. So, it was my school too. So, there was this yard where on the walls there were some words of wisdom sort of written. And it used to be my favorite work every day. I would keep jumping on the leaves, the fallen leaves of the trees, and keep reading what's written. And I would have read those words like thousands times. One specific thing which I remember, and I sort of reflected and contemplated a lot on that, was it was written in Hindi, but I'll translate in English and share. It said that to educate a girl is to educate a society.
Right.
And and that is a stark difference which I feel and I felt also from what you're sharing, because within your home, your own home, you had not just strong minded but also very safe and supported women who were so assured of their presence, their being.
That's right.
Whereas for me, I feel like my grandmother was also a very, very strong influence, but she also had certain traits which may not be appreciated quite a lot. They worked for her, they were her strength, but they were, judged quite a lot as well. And I somehow feel deeply that that comes from a sense when you are not safe and secure for your being or your present or your future. So, a sort of a warrior attitude develops inside you.
I think, in a way, strategies for survival,
Yes.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. So you go more towards survival than really thriving, growing, and blooming like your full potential.
Right.
So tell me, growing up with such strong women role models, did you have some unique set of challenges too that you sort of?
Yes, yes. So if I look back, I'm the only girl in the family, and in that sense, it was my responsibility, to uphold the family traditions and values. And, so to be a good girl was like a given, like there were no questions about it. And, but in addition to that, I think um, a lot of focus on doing well in anything that I did from my mom. I think my grandmother was more, I feel, more inclusive and more encouraging. Of course, there were standard good girl stereotypes that anyway worked very well. So I was a bit confused many times in terms of, did I have to be good, or did I have to excel? Because sometimes these two don't go together, right? Even in simple things like if you had to go sit in the library because there was no www, I mean, the internet, and you had to, focus on doing additional work, that was not kind of okay. You can borrow a book, you come back home and sit and read, but, there's no, there were very strict rules in terms of what was acceptable and what was not. So the good girl was a very big image that I mean, the good girl still pops up many a time, even now, after so many years. And now I feel that gender doesn't matter so much because I've been there, done that, and, worked and, I mean, had fun and all of that and gone through my own challenges. Yet the good girl pops up many a time because it's such a deep, ingrained, you know, uh, stereotype in a way. I mean, it's helped, but I feel that I actually did not dare dream beyond the good girl in a lot of ways. Still, I was much older, and I feel that I did lose out. I mean, I don't regret it, but I do feel that it did put limitations on the way I looked at what my choices could be or what I would love to do. So they were very limited at that point in time. So I feel the good girl did limit my horizons quite a bit.
Right. So, I can imagine, because that sort of a expectation prevails even now. But like you said, the avenues are more, the opportunities are more compared to the time when you were growing up and you were going through that time. A lot of things have changed. Like for my children, their way of looking at word is absolutely different because they grew up with everything moving on their fingers. So for you, and you had seen like an era shift entirely in terms of technological advancements, and world has now, everything has gone digital in a way. So how did you manage to transition along with the time? Like, what really helped you? How did you come over the challenges?
So I think, like I said, my hallmark is curiosity, and I think I'm an eternal learner. So, and a survivor because of maybe all the, you know, uh, I've studied in 7 schools and 3 colleges. And I mean, it's like, every year and a half, couple of years, we've moved. So languages is a strength. I have a I mean, I'm open to picking up languages, and I don't care if I'm saying the right, I mean, saying it right, but I will communicate. I mean, I'm a survivor, I think, in that sense. Very deep down, I'm a survivor and a learner. So I think that's helped. I remember the first time I encountered a computer, like a desktop, was in, I think, 89 or maybe 1991, maybe in Bombay. And, the software that was available was WordStar and, things like that. And that really kind of, and you just had to learn. I mean, there was no, if you have to continue, you have to learn, and just picked it up, I think. And after that, of course, after we moved to Bangalore, and I worked in Bangalore, mostly in the IT and ITES space, where anyway computers were part of it. So I think 2000 onwards, we've been in Bangalore. And I think after breaks for both my children, I have 2, I've taken complete breaks in my career. somewhere, because like I said, my mom had other responsibilities of bringing up my younger brothers and all that. So in that sense, I have believed that, the first 10 years of my career was probably very uh, uh, secondary, and family was very important. And I think post 2000 is when I really kind of made choices to grow and take risks and look at global roles, and I mean, very different things from what I've done in the first few years of my career when the children were small, and that kind of thing. But I do want to bring in a perspective here, Komal. So, one is the outer, how the world configures around, and the stereotypes and the discrimination and inequities and all of that. But I also feel there's this very active inner world, what I would call the inner landscape, which again is so critical to empowering oneself. So rather than be a response to, or be a reaction to, how do I find my voice? How do I actually get in touch with what really matters to me? And how do I make my voice, stronger and heard? And how do I make choices? I think that entire inner journey, I think that also came in very, I mean, I think in my life, my husband has also played a very, very significant role in terms of being supportive and encouraging of anything that he has found extremely, new and transformative. And I think process work was one such thing, and process work for inner transformation has been something I have engaged with since the early 90s. And I think that's one pillar that's really stood me in good stead. So if I'm here, and talking about all of this, I think that journey has been, in addition to all my experience and everything, I think the inner journey that actually helped me find myself, I think, has been very important. And I continue to engage with it. So I'm also the executive trustee of a foundation called Asta Foundation for Human Learning and Growth. We're based in Bangalore, but and we offer, it's a not-for-profit trust foundation, and we give voluntary time. We offer programs in the summer and winter for all age groups, residential programs for inner transformation, because that's one thing that's really made a difference to my life. And I think as many lives as we can touch is something that, so I think I've offered time since 95 to facilitate programs completely voluntary. And I think that's one thing that I truly believe in has made a difference, finding your voice.
That's so beautiful. That is absolutely so beautiful, because I think that is what more and more people need to come to understand, that external world will continue to be or continue to go on, but till the time we get in touch with our interiority, how we view our perspective, nothing outside is also going to be changing. You have brought a very important point, which is reminding me of something very powerful that I recently read in a book, and I wanted to share here. It's a book by David R. Hawkins. It's called The Map of Consciousness. So what he has done is he's sort of calibrated different levels of human consciousness, starting from the shame, guilt, anger, fear, up to love, joy, and enlightenment. And he's done those experiments and calibrated and sort of written. In his words, he says that whenever we observe something, we already make a change in that thing because the consciousness is involved.
Mm-hmm.
And he says that's why it's important to consider that from what level of consciousness you're making that perception or observation is how that thing or that event or phenomena is going to change.
Mm.
And so I found that so beautiful, and it resonates with what you're saying. That's
yes.
your inner world, your voice, and how you're bringing that out. Because the more you use your voice, that means the more you're in touch with your own inner authenticity and making a space for that.
That's right.
I think the better world we are creating, going to create.
Right.
And so, how do you see what is required for now us or the generations coming forward, especially when the world is going more and more AI and more digital, and it sort of looks and seems like nothing like ever before? So how do you see that our voice would really help us navigate in the new territories?
Yes. So I think especially through the pandemic, I think the way the world has worked has totally changed. I mean, I don't know if 2-3 years ago we would have imagined that the world would change. And in that sense, I think technology and innovation has definitely brought in, amazing reach in terms of resources, connectivity, access to, information about health and well-being, and I mean, all kinds of things. But it's also brought along with it other issues. And we are still talking about, you know, inequities and how can we, actually give access to girls and women uh, in order to, really make a difference. I mean, it's like a catalytic kind of change in a way. And how do we do that? I think there are multiple ways of doing it, but I do feel that if we had to start from scratch, the first thing I would probably focus on is the entire, you know, education, the textbooks, the content, and look at, how stereotypical or how I think there are smaller groups and writers and, trying to change the narrative, but it's still, not at a level that can actually. So I think you have to work at different levels. So whether it has to do with legislation, whether it has to do with education, whether it has to do with technology and societal transformations in the way that we look at. So I think it's working at different levels. And I think we are at a time and space where, for example, like whether it's the UN or anybody else, if we look at all the sustainable SDGs or the sustainable development goals that UN and the Global Goals Organization has taken on, I think gender equality is, I think, at number 5 or something, and reducing generally all kinds of inequities is, I think, goal number 10 or something, if I recall. Yeah. So I feel that there's a lot of rhetoric, there's a lot of, resources, there is a lot of conversation that's going around this. And I think this is the right time that, really transformative shifts can happen. But these have to happen, like I said, how do you offer a safe space for women to actually start to have these conversations, to try and discover what are some of these myths that they hold about themselves, hold about the world. So for example, for a long time, like one of the things, this is a personal example, that one of the things that I've heard from maybe, not so much from my grandmother, but maybe from other women, is that don't trust men, was one of the things that I had to really work with to actually cross thresholds of when I started my career and working with men. And most of the time I found myself a single woman in boardrooms. From ever since I've anchored human resources and, global roles, a lot of times at that level, there are very few women who heads a function. And so it will be mostly, I would be the only woman in the room. So imagine if you had to work with something which was so deeply ingrained and you had to, come into that. And I think I was the only woman girl in my MBA class. it was all men. So, I mean, I think it has taken a lot of working with. So I think one is, how do you create safe spaces for women to have these conversations? How do you actually work with policymakers to, and even like there's a lot of research and a lot of initiatives that are happening around, whether it's as part of CSR or universities and women's networking groups. But I feel that, I mean, one of my dreams is that at some point in time, there's a WWW, which is a worldwide women, which like you can go and, reach out for anything that you want, kind of thing, without being afraid of, am I crossing lines? Am I crossing boundaries? What am I doing? Just even to be stupid and to be able to talk about my fears and my ideas and my dreams, and and connect with people who I can connect with too. And I feel that it's not only women who are required. You also need champions, and
Yeah.
strong champions who truly believe in this cause. And this gender equality is not for the women alone, because if you look at economies, women are 50% of the population. I mean, they are like, and if you are actually, withholding them, or, there is no opportunities provided to them for contributing to the economy, then, I mean, what are we doing to countries, and what are we doing to sustainable development and all of those? So there are so many things that are linked. I feel that the time has come when things are shifting, but I think they need to connect, and it has to become, a larger. And there are other marginalized sections of the community as well. But then if I look at the human race, which is like, I don't know, 300,000 years old, and if I look at women who have joined the workforce, I mean, it's only in 2016 that, for example, the prevention of sexual harassment came in, which was a very, very, people never spoke about it, right? I mean, so it's taken so many years for things to move. So whether it's policy or legislation or narratives, I think that's where we need to work at.
Absolutely. And I feel that thinking of like don't trust the men sort of also I sort of experienced it in my mother's experiences too, although her entire life experience or journey after getting married, after having children and coming to the work life, like she has led so many men in her departments and wherever she's worked, but she did her education in a women's only college. And she was the kind who would be like, see a men, like treat them like a hand's distance or not treat them well, you can't trust them. And it's like, how did you end up getting married to a man then? We would joke, but now I understand and I appreciate now that it must have taken quite a lot for her to sort of understand or grapple with those different narratives. And
Mm.
you're right. I think one important thing is to, if we really want to shift and change the narratives, a very constructive effort is required towards all of those things. It only asks that you do everything to make these places, the workplaces or the social spaces, very, very safe, not just for women, but for men as well.
Yeah. So I'm sure men are also quite tired of the stereotypical
I know.
expectations from them. And I'm sure that, they would be happy to kind of look at it. But I still feel that over the, feminism and as a movement and, finding your voice and everything over the last few years, I think we've started, uh, growing up our daughters as sons in a way. I mean, I'm just using those words in inverted commas, but I'm not sure whether how many of us would bring up our sons as daughters. I mean, what I'm saying is that, of course, there is, I think, in aware societies and maybe in larger cities, these stereotypes have started dissipating a bit. But I think very deep down, it will take so many more, I don't know, years to change this narrative, this conversation that's going on in our head in terms of, I mean, the psyche of the human race itself, as to how does one, um, stop this differentiating. I think the word gender itself, I mean, all of us being human beings, how do we kind of get to that place where we can, of course, we have our own strengths and our abilities, whether, I mean, so if you look at, I mean, you were talking about patriarchal economy and all that. And I was just looking at what really worked so far and what will not work, because that rhetoric has already started. So if you look at pre-pandemic, or whatever has worked. I mean, you look at GDP and you look at, control and competition and all of those as pillars of that economic paradigm, which was driven mostly by patriarchal economies. And if I look at post-pandemic, we are talking of compassion, we are talking of fostering, and these are a whole lot of things which are very intrinsic to the feminine. And I feel that as individuals, we have both. Just that because of the stereotypes, we've probably invested more into one part of us than the other. And how can we integrate this to actually reduce these huge differences, or, that are between gender? Of course, we will have the, like we will have, I mean, childbirth, and I mean, those are the physicalities of being. But if you even look at, even now I hear HR managers or organization leaders saying, let's not hire women because now the maternity leave has become 6 months, and not sure whether, and they also can extend for another 6 months without pay, and then you don't even know whether they'll come back. So how do I want to deal with it? But it's reality that if you, I mean, you can only have children through women as of now. I don't know whether AI and, robots will take that on. Maybe they will at some point in time. But I mean, if that is reality, and if it is reality that 50% of the population are joining the workforce, then maternity leave is a reality. I mean, it's part of, it's a given. So, I mean, these kind of things, I think are something that one does need to, look. I mean, how do you look at these kind of things? So, for example, even unpaid work. So, for example, household work or caregiving is a large part of the economy in a way. So, if you were to hire somebody to do all that, how much would you pay?
Yes.
Right. And that is not accounted. Only the GDP seems to be accounted for. And what about this entire portion of, unpaid work that everybody, I'm not saying only women do, I mean, men also do, but to a large extent, women take on because it's part of their, how they've grown up and stereotype and everything. So I'm just wondering how, I mean, so there's a lot of things that we have to actually change the definitions about.
Yeah. And, that's one question which sort of appeared more and more in my awareness when I made a move from India to Canada a few years back. Because when you are closer on the ground in certain spaces, you know more about the reality of the situations.
Mm-hmm.
So a certain part of the world is called as underdeveloped, certain part is called as developing, some certain part is called as developed. And when you come to that developed world, you notice and observe, yes, the per capita income is higher. Yes, the GDP is great. Yes, their currency is very, very strong. But they are on the ground grappling with such dire situations, such dire conditions. The addiction rates of the people are so high. The violence, person to person violence rates are so high. The education system at the ground is sort of crumpling down. And I was like, on what basis do these countries claim to be developed? How are we sort of defining development then?
Yeah.
like you said, only in a very, very number or a very, very material gain terms. And that material gain, how? Through spoiling the environment, not bothering about the earth, water, air,
Absolutely.
polluting and creating a havoc in the entire world. And then waking up and thinking, oh, somebody else sort of takes care of it.
Yeah,
So
that's
I
true.
think what's showing up more and more to me in this conversation with you as well, and through my self reflection, is like at a very large systemic levels too, and at a very personal individual levels too. I think we
Mhm.
need to spend some time with redefining our definitions.
Absolutely.
Like, what does success really means for us?
Yeah, so if I
And
actually, I'm sorry, Komal, go ahead.
no problem. Go ahead.
So I think one of the things that I'm in touch with is, I mean, looking at the economic paradigms of a patriarchal society, and if we kind of try and superimpose, let's say, from a feminine economic paradigm perspective, I feel collaboration and compassion and more with the natural cycles of ecology and the environment and sustainability and all of this I feel would come in, because if I look at the richest, the tallest, the, I mean, that kind of paradigm, then it's at the cost of, I mean, you've actually um, lost your connect with everything else around, because then only that matters. And what are we doing to people around? What are we doing to the environment? What are we doing to the world at large is totally ignored, or because then you're caught with competition and just that. And I think uh, actually what the world needs is an integration of both. Can we balance it out? And I think for that, we do need to bring in both. So, for example, one of the inequities that I'm aware of is women entrepreneurs hardly get financial help or loans from financial institutions, primarily because they don't own anything. Like mostly, if I look at the economy, and if men are the earners, and they have, titles to the property, etc., then women don't have. Whereas, I mean, of course, now there are slight changes, and in fact, I think there are places where they are insisting that if you're married, then the title should be a joint one. But that is very few and far in between again. So I think one of the initiatives of the women's cooperative movement, I think Seva is an example, where they have actually started the Seva Bank, and they have put in money together. The women's cooperatives have actually put in money. So they have close to, I think, um, 5 million members, and each of them have actually put in, whatever they can share into the bank, and then people draw credit from it. So I think microfinancing as a concept, at a grassroots level, to make that um, difference. And like you said, when you educate a woman, it's not only her, but it's the family and then the society and the network somehow, because collaboration and sharing are very, very, part of the entire landscape, both, I mean, inner landscape. So I think that's the way to go. And I think um, all these innovations that we are looking at in the way society looks at it, one is the technological innovations and what those can help. So, for example, I was so happy that the lady who irons my clothes has a GPay account. I mean, like she didn't have it initially. So when the
Yeah.
pandemic started and everything, only her husband had. And she used to be very worried because we never had cash to give her. So we'd have to GPay him. But now she has her own GPay account. And I mean, these are things that are changing in front of you. And I
Yeah.
think these things will make a difference. So,
Yeah, I understand that because there's a completely different sense of uh, being acknowledged for your work, or knowing that, yes, I do have got some strength or some capability to make my own independent decisions and choices.
Mm.
And this also reminds me, so in Canada here, I'm associated with two different NGOs that work with the women. And one of them recently, a friend sort of shared this opportunity to become a mentor for some women who are being coached and mentored to be entrepreneurs.
Okay, lovely.
So it's a group of 24, 25 women. And I kid you not, all of them, their ideas are super brilliant. I am so impressed when I heard their business ideas. And somehow they're all associated with wellness
They're
and
all
well-being of
associated with
people,
wellness.
wellness and well-being of people in their own way.
Lovely.
Like somebody wants to do something with the health food vending machines in hospitals and places here. Somebody wants to offer some service to the terminally ill or cancer patients for their
Mhm.
pain management, or alternate ways of supporting, and so many different things. It's amazing to see.
Right.
And I have, through my move to Canada, and that too at a time, especially when there was so much of lockdown and everything going on, and I didn't know anybody here. I think what really supported me were two things. One is I definitely had some support from my family. I was living with my brothers, so I wasn't worried to immediately start to earn or to do something. And then the government policy support.
Okay.
And I realized during that time period that it doesn't matter how much educated a woman is or whether she's not educated. If they have to thrive, then the support is definitely required from all the aspects.
Right.
It is required at a larger systemic level through the government policies and procedures as well. And it's also required at the levels of families
Right.
and social platforms and networks.
Right.
Otherwise, it's a tough journey of striving and fighting and then becoming a warrior.
Yeah. So I think the timing, of, I mean, if you look back at dramatic successes that has happened in societal transformation, for example, I mean, one thing I can think of is the pill, which
Yeah.
came in the US so many years ago, because then women had the freedom over their own bodies and, their choices in terms of when to start a family or not, or whatever, certain amount of freedom to decide when they wanted to, and all of that. So I think there is a need to capitalize on these, social and other trajectories at the same time. And you have to ride that wave, because otherwise, without support, like you said, it could become vocal activism and maybe
Yes.
take much longer to, I mean, if you have to look at an societal change or a larger transformation, I think the the support, I mean, at all levels, I think is very, very important.
Fantastic. And so, one question which is sort of popping up in my mind. So I see now, notice quite a lot of these content creators in the new age and new space who are women, especially from the West side. There are quite a lot who are online creating content, motivating and inspiring other people. Do you see back in India, we still somewhere have a little bit of this mindset like girls and technology?
No, I mean, so I've been part of the technology industry for almost 20 plus years now. Um,
Mhm.
I mean, 23 years to be precise. When I restarted after a break was in 2000 after my children. And what I remember is, uh, I mean, what I've experienced is, I don't think there is a difference, and I see a lot of women who are part of the, technology space, content creators, design, user interface design, UI and UX. I mean, all kinds of things, even AI. And I mean, I've seen quite a lot of women, not only women who are in their 20s and all, I've seen, older women as well who have been part of that technology, innovations that started sometime early 2000s or late 90s kind of thing. So they are very, very much part of the technology industry, and I think connectivity and the internet have actually exploded that possibility that girls and women can actually, irrespective of wherever they are sitting, because now there are a lot of roles, especially content creation and all that, you can work from anywhere. It doesn't really matter that you have to be, I mean, you have to be on calls and be connected and try and get the, what is required to be done. But other than that, you're pretty much creating it on your own and working along with other teams. So I feel it's actually exploded in a way that it has actually, some of those boundaries have actually dissipated or disappeared. Yeah.
I recently read a news report which wasn't really very surprising and alarming, because that's the sort of trend which I've also been observing around me quite a lot. This news article was around the fact that how couples these days, and especially women, are opting to have no children. So they have like no child policy. We are not going to have any child. How do you look at it? I mean, do you think this is something like, what is happening when we hear this, and where do you think this is going to take us all?
So I don't know what percentage of the population it is, because I mean, at least in India, from whatever I see and my own experience with the current generation, I do agree with you that there is a certain percentage that is moving towards and making those decisions. But I would put that possibly at not more than, let's say, 15%, 10 to 15%. And I think there is still a lot of the old world in India. I mean, if you look at the tier 2 and tier 3, there are still first time job seekers and, people, families from agricultural backgrounds whose children have just started join the industry, technology industry. So there's still a journey. So I feel that, I mean, it's both. There are both. And the percentage now is still, but yeah, and I think the world, the way it's going, I mean, not to sound very negative, but, this question of, do you want to bring one more human being into this world, which is fighting at all levels? I mean, whether you talk of Ukraine or what's happening in Tehran with the girls and the women, as far as, I mean, poisoning girls. I mean, I was like shocked when I was reading it, saying concerted effort to actually keep girls at home. And I'm wondering, so, I mean, I actually, if I was born now and I'm part of the, if I'm in my 20s, I would probably think twice before bringing one more human being into this world. And I think it's a choice that that's valid. So I'm not so concerned, because I think it's also a cycle. And yeah, I think people go through it. And yeah, so imagine the cataclysmic changes that have happened since we joined the industry. I mean, since I joined the industry. And I mean, I always feel I'm the bridge generation, which has seen the old world order and the new world order. So, and I mean, I think one has to be open to, so many more possibilities, and I think newer things. So I have my questions around AI being useful to a certain level, but I don't think human beings will be replaced, for example.
Yeah.
So in that sense, there are many things that they will do. So it's like how when technology came in, you no longer need to do your math in your memory, things
Yes.
like that. There will be certain things that they will do, and there will be certain other things we will do. We may lose our lower faculties, but maybe we'll have our
Develop higher
intuition and
faculties. Yeah.
higher faculties opening up. So I think I'm positive that a superior race will emerge, which is much more um, compassionate and developmental and inclusive and a more balanced world.
Absolutely. And that is one thing which I think we also get to see more and more in coaching world as well, where the
Absolutely.
competencies actually demand for you to not come from your judgments or what you already know, but be in a curious space of not knowing anything.
Right.
And to have less and less of memory burden means you really are naturally in that space, not knowing and being really present for the person who's in front of you.
Right.
So that way, in a way, AI is doing a service to humankind, relieving us of all those burdens of not getting to remember all the things, and they come more closer to our human intelligence, basically.
Mhm. That's true.
Good. Wonderful. We sort of are culminating so many different points, and I just wanted to check with the people who are on the call with us if there is any question, any comment, anything that you would like to share with us. Please do share in the chat box, and we'll pick it up. So, what next for you, Preeti? You have sort of come and started your journey from a space, transitioned so much, and also given back and are still continuing to learn. What does future look like for you?
I think relationships is one area that I really draw a lot of energy from, and I feel that um, you know the and especially after having gone through the formal coaching framework, etc. I mean, I used to do as part of my consulting a lot of individual as well as leadership coaching, but this puts a framework around it. I feel most of the answers are within us, and can we ask the right kind of questions which can actually open out windows, throw more light, and can people own up more of their potential that they seem to hold locked up because of all the way they've grown up, or all the limitations that they perceive to be around or have experienced really. So I think more and more I would love to spend time offering that to people, is and I think it will make a much better world in whatever is my circle of influence. So I think that's what I look forward to. And wherever I can make a difference, I think that's what gives me happiness. So that's where I am. And of course, keep myself active and take care of, mine and, well-being of people who I come in touch with in whatever way I can. I think that's what will make me happy, and hopefully uh, make this world a better place.
Yeah, beautiful. One thing that I want to share, like you started it with having a very strong role model in terms of your grandmother. And I also recall the influences that my grandmother had on my life. When I came to Canada, I got to know about the indigenous culture and that how revered the role of grandmothers have been in the indigenous culture.
Mhm.
They were considered to be the caretakers of the wisdom and all knowledge that they will pass on to their grandchildren and the next generations. And
Mhm.
generation after generation, their role was so strong in the community, in the society. And when the Britishers came and they began to colonize Canada, the first thing that they did was to take away those generations apart from each other.
Brutal.
and and it was brutal, and the pain is still felt in the land where we are. But I personally feel and think that the world needs more and more grandmother figures, more and more grandmother mentors who do not belong to any particular land but are available and accessible to everybody around the world. And the elders who can sort of hold the space for the new generation to come up and somehow sort of help them also stay connected to the roots,
Yeah.
while they are exploring their own flight, their own journey ahead. And so I think, and there, this technology advancements, I think, could be very, very useful. Like you said, the Worldwide Women Network, I would say Worldwide Grandmothers Network or association or whatever. But that would be something fantastic to
Yeah. And
imagine.
not to exclude the men somehow, because they
Yes.
also bring in their own strengths
Value.
and
Yeah.
I mean, so I think men who have been able to integrate their compassionate and, collaborative sides, who, that again is a huge strength. So I feel not to exclude, but to include is something I'm in touch with. But yeah, I think so many things have changed from when women were only to be seen and not heard to, uh, women running organizations and running countries, and so many of those things, still few and far in between, and there's still a large numbers to touch, but I think it'll happen. And I have very deep faith that human beings at some point will have to take cognizance of, um, that what is needed is to evolve from what we are to looking at more inclusive paradigms. So I think that's where I am.
Wonderful. And so, with all that hope and intention and expectation for the future, thank you so much, Preethi, for joining and sharing your journey with all of us. And thank you, everybody, for staying on call and holding a space for us and this conversation to happen. Have a wonderful day, night, wherever you're joining from.
Thank
Any
you so
last words,
much. I
Preethi?
think I want to add to that. Uh, it was a very natural and there was a good flow in the conversation, I think. And thank you so much, Komal, for being there. And I think I thoroughly enjoyed today's conversation. Thank you, Coacharya, for inviting me today to be on the panel. And I had my concerns, but I think they were unfounded. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Preethi and Komal. It was just a beautiful conversation, and even with so much gratitude for you both and for the space that women and also men, like you shared, hold. So thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you, Kiva.
Thank
And
you to all our
to
lovely
I think to
participants.
each of the participants for, being there.
Absolutely. Thank you all. We'll close off now for today, and we'll see you next week at the same time. See you.
Sure.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.